Yes, how you doing?
Hey, good man. How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you so much for the invitation. Happy to be here to chat a little bit about photography and stuff.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, we're gonna have to try to squeeze this into an hour, right? Because I'm sure both you and I could talk about photography and stuff forever and ever. So, but we're gonna open forum. It's good to meet you. How are you doing? And are you in the California Bay Area?
No, I'm actually in New York City. I'm over
Okay.
here. Yeah, I'm doing great, man. I'm preparing to actually release my next collection next week. So I'm doing a lot of, preparing and writing and calling last minute stuff. But I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a really special one.
Yeah, no, this whole thing is exciting, and I want to remind the folks, and I'll do this a bunch during the hour. If you guys are in the room with us, go ahead and raise your hand or whatever you do to get on stage. I want to make this an open forum conversation, not just two guys talking about photography and NFTs. Make it a group effort here, And the title of this light hour is value versus process in photography. So I want to start with that. Maybe we kick off the conversation with that, and just sort of keep it light. The whole idea, and that I think Dap is in here too. Dap, are you in? Are you on the mic?
Yep, I'm here. Hey guys.
Hey man, hey, good. I see your face in here. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, how are
I'm
you doing over
excited.
there? You hanging in there out in the east?
Yeah, just you guys are starting your evening. I just dropped my kids off to school, so happy days.
Yeah,
Somebody else
you're
can
already in the.
take care of them now.
There you go. That's the plan. Well, cool, man. Well, it's good. I think this is going to be a good chat. Like I was telling Omar, it's going to be interesting to squeeze this into an hour because I think there's so much to mine in the conversation about value versus process in photography and NFTs, or just in the NFT space. We can just talk about that for hours and hours, alone the photography side of it. But yeah, I think we should just sort of dive into it, unless you guys have different ideas how to flow this. Normally my day to day operation is podcast host. So Dap, as you know, I'm used to the more on rail structured host guest type flow. And this is not that. And I'm looking forward to this not being that, just having a dialogue with everyone on the floor and you guys and all that. I think that'll be much more substantive in this format.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the one thing I would say though is I think this topic came about because I guess Omar had a reaction to something that somebody on Twitter had kind of written about, and so there was
mm,
kind of a background to the conversation. So it might be a good idea to get Omar to just kind of share a little bit of that background first, and before we
yeah,
go to like the Q&A and all that. So I don't know, Omar.
yeah. Omar, you want to
Yeah,
you want to dive in, give us some background?
yeah, sure. So it's interesting because this is something that is not, it's been discussed oftentimes, right? And especially, even back, I think in photography in general, it happens. But I remember back in the early, stages or early days of NFT photography, there was a little bit of that conversation, and it was interesting for me to see this conversation, being brought up again by collectors, and by one collector in particular, and it was about using the descriptions, basically advising the photographers to use the descriptions of their NFTs to describe the process of their works, so to call attention to the process, and in that way also, for people to understand the value inherent to the work because of the process, right? And he was making a whole argument as to why photography is not as visible and appreciated in the NFT space, in his opinion, because photographers are doing a bad job of explaining their process process, and how labor intensive it is. And again, this is a conversation that's been had in the art world in general. But then in the NFT space, it was had before, and then it's gonna, it happened again. And I think, we're gonna have this happen again oftentimes. So I took the opportunity to address, the matter, and I wrote, like a pretty lengthy thread back to the collector, explaining that, in my opinion, not in my opinion, in reality, photography, as any other art form, is process intensive, and maybe some photographs are less process intensive than others, but it doesn't, but still there was like a process there of years of experience, etc. And hence, I don't see why photographers need to, show receipts or detailed invoices in a certain way as to, the work, to justify the value of the work, because at the end of the day, the value is not in the process, period. Value is in the art. And yeah, that's basically where the conversation started. And after that, I ended up actually minting a piece, actually two pieces of performances, and they were called the description and also the description. And it was a little bit of making, kind of a statement about that kind of mentality that we see from the collector space, but also to add to that commentary, I think, the collectors are informed by the artists in the space in a certain way. And if they are making those statements, it's also because, they're hearing it from artists in a certain way. And I see that oftentimes in the space, artists try to justify the value, or attract people towards their work based on, everything that they had to do to achieve those results, right? So that's a conversation that can be had, and I think, I can leave it at that, and then we can dive deep into the subject.
That's a really good way to start the conversation. This, like you said, this conversation has been and is going on currently, right? And I guess in most genres that are subjective and creative, right? Like photography is just one of them. But in photography, especially, I think, because I'm curious what you guys think about this, and anyone listening, throw your hands up if you guys want to join in to the conversation. But in the photography world, the problem or the issue, I think, is compounded because everyone's a photographer, right? Well, back in the day when it took a very specific skill set and budget in order to become a competent photographer, and even then, only a limited number of people can see your shots. Today, it's the complete opposite. Everyone has a supercomputer in their pocket; they can take great photos. Therefore, even in like the wedding photography or other professional photography genres, clients are like, well, why am I paying you X thousands of dollars to do this when I can do it myself with this thing? And then you fast forward that to, or transfer that to the world of NFTs and valuation. If someone's looking at a photo and they're like, oh yeah, I could have done that in my backyard with the shot, even if it's not true. But if they're valuing it at a I could do that level, why am I going to pay you for that? How do we get past that? I'd love for anyone to take that. Like Omar, maybe you can kick us off. How do photographers take that mindset, that price perception mindset, and shift it into it's about the art, and it's about, it's not just about the pixels that I happen to capture with this device that everybody has. It's about the story that I'm telling and the artistic integrity behind the piece. How do you shift that? How do you shift the discussion?
Of course. So this is an interesting argument that we keep hearing about, and actually the collector in that thread that he made, allusion. He, made reference to that idea of like the iPhone, and everyone having an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
but the problem actually, in reality, the problem, if you see it, is not in the accessibility to the tools. Because everyone has at their reach, many tools to create art. starting with your voice. Everyone has a voice, everyone has a mouth, yet not everyone is a singer, of course. And even if you
Right.
can
Yeah.
produce a few notes and sing occasionally, a singer is a person that dedicates themselves to the study of music and the craft of singing, and has the talent to make you feel things, has the talent to create nuances in their voice, etc., right? Same thing with a pen and paper. Everyone has a pen and paper, yet not everyone is a writer. Not everyone
Hmm.
is a poet. A poet is that person that studies writing and how to use words to in a rhythmic, melodic way, etc., right? And has dedicated their lives to that. And the same thing with photography. Everyone can have a camera. It doesn't matter if it's an iPhone or a digital camera. But a photographer is that person that dedicates himself to the craft. The issue with photography, however, I believe is more in the immediacy of the results in a certain way, right? Especially and now because the results are are at a hand's reach in that sense, but it doesn't matter again that because of a phone can essentially produce to a certain extent a corrected image. It's okay, but there's obviously the elements of composition, and more importantly, the elements of storytelling that we as photographers, the people have dedicated ourselves to this craft, know how to use to our advantage in order to tell a specific story. And that goes for photojournalism, that goes for wedding photographer, that goes for artistic photography, and so on and so forth. So that's the way I would, in a way, tackle that argument. Of course, at the end of the day, it's hard to when someone is trying to make that argument to you, it's hard to fight back in a certain way, because it's like at the end it's like, if you want to die ignorant, go ahead. Like I'm not gonna be the one person that's gonna educate everyone in the world.
Right.
But I think through my work and through demonstrating time and time again that the photographs that I create are valuable because my point of view as a creator, and obviously my expertise and my time learning how to do the craft. That's, I think, what in the end makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot there. And Dap, do you want to chime in on that? And I know we've got Johnny Valentine who wants to talk about
Yeah,
this as well.
yeah. So I agree with what Omar is saying in broad strokes. I think the one part where I think it's just worth thinking about a little bit is, I guess, two parts. So the first one is around, who's on the receiving end of that, right? So when we focus on whether it's process or we focus on the craft or on the artist, right? Of course, that is where I think the bulk of the value is. In some respects. On the other hand, the person who is on the other side receiving that art, right? So in this case, whether it's a collector or somebody who's appreciating that art, how does that land, right? And what they're looking for. And so somehow I wanted to get that into that conversation somehow, because there will be some people who will place value on effort, right? Or on process or whatever that is, right? And I think, we could call it educating them if you want. That's not all it's all about, but then also at the same time, who's to say that that's a wrong approach, right? There's this, there is a common thing in life that people do value, process. Like, so if it takes a long time to get to something. So I think that's one aspect that I was just thinking about. The second one is around the description, right? So I come through art all the time. And I think sometimes the description is a key part of why I may be interested in that, right? And I kind of see the description or the name, right, or the place where it is displayed as part of the art to a certain extent, right? So I do think that some artists say, I'm not going to have any description. I don't even have a name. My art speaks for itself. It's like composition number one, whatever, right?
Hmm.
That in
Hmm.
itself,
Yeah.
that in itself says something, right? On the other hand, you can definitely use your descriptions to kind of complement your storytelling as part of your art. And I because that's how the person going to see that art is going to also perceive it, is going to be part of their experience interacting with your art usually. right? And so we cannot kind of say, oh, it's not important. I think it is, but it's just kind of how you use it as an artist as a tool for your art.
Yeah. Johnny,
So
you wanna chime in on this?
I wanted to chime in something really fast. Sorry, Johnny. I
Yeah,
just
go for
wanted
it.
to reply to Dap. Um, so there's a couple of things that I usually do when I tackle this subject, and the first one I think is separate appreciation from value itself, right? When we talk about value, I think it's completely justified, not only justified but smart for artists, to factor in the cost of creation, and that's just smart business decisions, like if when you were creating that artwork, you had to travel abroad, you had expenses, you definitely have to factor that in, and that makes 100% complete sense. But when it comes to appreciation, well, that's a different thing, right? When you're trying to make people appreciate your work because of the effort, then what are you trying for them to appreciate, the work or the effort? Because if it's the effort, then the quality of the work then perhaps at that point takes a second or a backseat in that sense. I understand that sometimes process can be interesting and sometimes even intricate as a part of the art itself if it's something that it's innately innovative. And because it's an innovative result, it's an innovative process, I'm sorry, the results are also innovative, right? We're seeing something that we haven't seen before as a result, and the process then becomes interesting because, and sometimes, we can even argue that the process itself can be performative as a part of the work. So that's interesting, and that maybe it's interesting to add it. But when it comes to adding descriptions to the work, when you start like just basically giving invoices as to how difficult it was, etc., then I think you're taking the conversation away from the artwork itself, and I think then the art appreciation takes a backseat.
Yeah, yeah. Johnny, you want to chime in on that at all?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for
Yeah, go
having me
for it.
up here in the first place.
Yeah.
Also, Omar, I love. I've been following you on Twitter for a long time and really appreciate all the things that you have to say, and especially this sort of like performative piece. I think is exceptional and fun and interesting to sort of stir up the conversation. Um, I kind of see two sides to this. One, I kind of understand it from a collector's perspective. Like you sort of want to understand a process involved in what you're purchasing, and it's the description can often sort of be like ancillary to the piece itself. I typically don't really include a very involved description, partially because I don't want to sort of influence the interpretation of the shot or what it could mean personally for someone else. So I almost never include one. But the difference, I think, is I think when you get into tricky or sticky territory is when you feel like you have to justify the work in some capacity. And I think that that's part of what your piece kind of speaks to in some ways is do I need to actually justify this piece, or can it just live on its own and be appreciated for what it is versus having to explain to someone why they should appreciate it, which I actually think often can devalue the piece as a whole. If you sort of drive someone to interpret it a specific way, it sort of like kills the possibility or potential of someone else sort of interpreting it differently and experiencing your work in a way that you never intended. So I think it can be a valuable tool, like Dap mentioned. I think it can be useful for an artist to sort of show maybe some personality aspect or sort of like a contextualizing element to the body of work, for example. If you go into a gallery or a museum, there's going to be a body of work on display there, and there's going to be a description for that entire body of work that sort of contextualizes everything, and it may not spell outright exactly how to view the work or how to experience it for the patron there, but I think it sometimes gets context in a way that's helpful for the artist to sort of explain what it is and why.
Yeah, I wonder what you guys think about, and that maybe you can take this first. I mean, the what Omar was saying about, everyone has a voice, but not everyone's a singer, right? Of course, that makes 100% sense. I look at it kind of as, what if you look at it from through the perspective of it's audience driven? Like when you're creating, what I mean by that, if you're creating work, like using the analogy of the singer, that singer has a very specific audience that wants to hear the type of singing that they do, and other people that enjoy other genres may think it's crap, right? That person or their genre that they're performing in, but there's a finite audience of people that appreciate that work and value that singer and are willing to stand in lines for tickets and buy all the things and follow them online, etc., where other people couldn't care. I wonder if that same kind of dynamic isn't present in this world as well, in the world of photography and NFTs as well, where someone like Omar, you're gonna create an audience, or you have created an audience of raving fans that love what you're doing and can't wait for the next drop, right? Do you play to that audience and forego everyone else, and if you're on board, you're on board. If you're not, you're not. Or is it a play where you need to, at least to some degree, satisfy the masses so that you can just keep increasing the mass of your raving fan base? I don't know. Dab, you wanna take that one, and then maybe Omar, you could piggyback on.
Oh, not really. I think I'll leave that to Omar. It's too hard. No, but
That's
let
easy.
let the artist goes first. I think Omar should go first, and I can chime in later. He has
Okay,
his
go
hands
for it.
up also.
I mean, I
Okay.
think so. I wanted to also comment on a couple of things that Johnny said. But to your question, I think as artists, we first and foremost create for ourselves. And I think that's the one thing that we always have to think about, right? Like you create for yourself. Afterward, when you're talking about selling your work and marketing your work, well, that's about how you do it, right? But ideally, you want to have your cake and eat it too, as to what you were saying, right? You want to be able to shoot for the masses, or damn bad choice of words, especially today, my bad.
Right,
Um,
right, yeah.
you want
We get
to
it. We get
aim,
it.
capture the masses, right? You want to talk to the masses. You want to talk to everyone. But eventually, there's going to be some people that are going to identify with your message more for whatever reason. And along the way, you're going to be able to evangelize in a certain way more people that are going to be either by organic growth, or and also because of they see other people latching onto your work, and then they want to follow that as well, right? Especially in a place like the NFT space, that people often here act based on other people's behavior, right? So ideally, I think it's important for artists to aim for themselves first, to create for themselves, and then help people understand them along the way. But what I wanted to add to a little bit to your analogy as well to music, in terms of the appreciation, and also to what Johnny was saying, it was like when it comes to the collector side, it's interesting again that when a collector or a person, a consumer of music, for example, listens to an album or to a singer, you never think, well, I really need to know how many hours this guy spent on their studio to make sure, that, whatever I'm listening, it's worth it, or I can appreciate it, right? You never do that. You never, when you see a sculpture, you never think, well, I'm gonna have to ask the artist, how many hours he spent there. You never do, because it's a given. The process is a given. Hence why I defend in this, in the case of photography, that the process should be a given as well. Like there shouldn't be like a justification as to, why. And then in that case, I think collectors should start, getting that through their minds once and for all, that in the case of photography, the process is a given. Now, as Johnny was saying, contextualizing a photograph can make it more identifiable in a certain way. If I tell you, when Dab collected my first photograph, he asked me, he reached out to me and asked me, what else can you tell me about this photograph? And I volunteered the information, because there's nothing I love talking about my work, of course. So I'm happy when people ask me about my work. I was like, sure, let's talk about it. Now I have to say that honestly, on the artist side, there's always like a little bit of a thing where you're like, all right, I need to make sure that I say the right things, because I want this photo to be bought, right? I want this photo to be collected. So there's a little bit of that pressure. But that's just, salesmanship in a certain way, right? At the end of the day. But but there's, the go back again, that it's not and it should never be about how difficult it was. Obviously, in my case, for example, in that photograph, there's a level of expertise that I have that very few people have, in order to be able to photograph dancers the way I do it. Not just from the technical point of view, but also from the stylistic point of view. But again, just as you appreciate music and other art forms, you understand that that is a given, and that's part of what you should be appreciating and looking at.
Yeah. Hey, Erica, you got your hand up. You want to join in?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me up. Great conversation. And at first, Omar, I wasn't sure how much I was understanding where you were going with things, but I've really learned a lot from what you just said. Really great points about especially when you make the music analogy, and it kind of reminds me of that story of, I think it's true, about a woman approaching Picasso and asking him to scribble something on a napkin, and he said that'll be $10,000, and she said, "What, you did that in 30 seconds?" And he said, "No, it took me 40 years to do that." I really appreciate, and I think I really struggle with this very thing, because, like, okay, for example, with let's see. So if I back up a little bit, as a collector, to be really straightforward, when people say, I hiked uphill both ways for 10 miles in the snow and all this stuff, I'd kind of be lying if I said that didn't kind of give me pause, or kind of take me out of the moment for a second, almost, right? Away, like you say, Omar, from the art being just valuable because it's absolutely exquisite and they nailed it. And, however they nailed it, I don't care, but they nailed it. And so I think there's sometimes a difference between, if I love the art, maybe the story is more valuable. And if I don't love the art, then maybe I start to feel weird. So I'm just being really straight about that. But, but then I think about, as a landscape photographer, I've noticed that when I'm terrible at pitching my own work, so I'm just going to be honest about that. But I've noticed that when friends ask me, how did you make that? Oh, how did you get that? That's so beautiful, and I end up just like, because I'm being as open and honest as possible, because they're my friend, I tell them the whole story. And then I realize, oh my God, that did take me 7 years to get, because I went back to that. I mean, not really 7 years, obviously, but like I went back to that location every single, 5 times a winter for 7 years until I got that shot. And, it's not like a receipt, but it's part of the journey, and it's part of the tale, right? Of like that, why that's probably not going to be seen again, or I don't know what it is, but it's just kind of the story that's kind of interesting, hopefully. But it's just, I definitely have a hard time knowing which direction to go when I talk about my own work. And I think that I think that also, I will say, with landscape photography, it's like, I've been noticing, because I used to be an athlete, I've been noticing recently that it really is like almost, it's partly a sport. So when people talk about it, like, this is what it took me to get that, I think it's actually like part of the tale of like the actual physical process is very, very, very important to that work. So it does make sense at times.
Erica, maybe you could continue. I have a question for you that I want to put out to everyone in the room here. and I've talked about this on my podcast a fair amount, and that's the question of who, as an artist, are you creating for? Like Erica, you mentioned you're a landscape photographer. Or when you go out, is it a catharsis for you just to go out and kind of go out there and shoot, which is perfectly acceptable? Or are you shooting for clients? Or are you shooting for likes online? Like what's the motivation for you, Erica, specifically when you go out there and shoot your landscapes?
Wow. Yeah, it's 100,000% for myself. And I think I did it for 15 years before I sold anything because I just couldn't stop doing it. And I don't know, having spent 10 years in New York City, like landscape photography was an absolute joke. Like I don't know. I mean, that was my take, was like, are you kidding me? Don't do that. So I was just completely doing it for myself and never thought it would be something I'd want to sell, but now it's a thing. So that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah. I wonder, like, Omar, what about you? Like your motivations for shooting, and maybe they've changed since you started, right? Like what are your motivations when you click that shutter? And it could be multiple answers, right? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's definitely multiple answers. It's most depending on the type of work that I'm creating. If it's street photography, it's oftentimes observational, right? It's almost like notes to self, because it's really about the way I perceive life around me every day and the people and the reactions of the people. So it's almost like it's not almost, it's really about a study of human behavior. And then oftentimes it's afterwards when I come home that I start making sense of things, and how someone very smart that is on this stage that have said many times, is pay attention to what you pay attention to. That's something that Erica often says, and that's when you come home and you realize, all right, so after so many years of photographing, I realize these are the themes that I go back to. So why am I going back to those themes? Why are those things speaking to me, right? So in terms of the street photography, that's sort of where I'm going for. When it's about the dance photography, it's similar, but at the same time, it's a little bit about trying to break with that everyday narrative that I see in the world. But again, it's all about I'm creating because I'm creating the things that I want to see. If that makes any sense, like I love dance. I love, how it's such a beautiful communicative art form that speaks completely through the body, and it needs no words. It's all about, the intention and the power and the amazingness of the human body. So I want to see that. And I want other people to see that. So, and I place it on the streets because I want to break everyday life and break the norm. And again, imagine a world that is different. And again, going back to my own psyche, since I was a kid, I've always had that dream that I could fly. So that's also what I'm chasing. I'm chasing that dream in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's curious. I always think about this stuff because what you said, Omar, makes 100% sense, right? And of course, but I also think when you're a medium to advanced amateur photographer, and you're everyone's impressionable, right? We're all humans, right? Everyone's impressionable, and you put a piece out there that you put your heart and soul into. This really speaks to who you are as a person. You put it out there, and there's crickets, right? And you put something out there in a genre that you're not necessarily enthused about, and it goes wild and gets viral acceptance. What's the play here as the artist, right? Do hey, I got to feed the koi fish what they want, so I'm going to throw more bread in there, right? Even if I don't like this kind of bread, I'm going to throw more bread to the koi fish. Or do you stay true to yourself and just create art that speaks to your own soul? I don't know. What do you guys think? Omar or anybody wants to join in?
I'd love to jump in on this one because I
Go
think
ahead. Go ahead, John.
I almost have an inverse of the story. Originally, years ago, before I really honed in on this approach that falls under the line of this Johnny Valentine persona, I was big time sort of into shooting landscapes. I worked for a production company called Camp 4 Collective that creates documentary work for, I don't know if you've ever seen like the movie Free Solo with Alex Honnold or any like Renan Ozturk films for mountaineering or anything. Um, I worked really closely with that production company, and I was a director there for a number of years, and it was all based in landscapes. And so all I did was really shoot landscapes. And over a course of a number of years, I realized at the end, I was like, I feel like I'm sort of just turning into a product of my environment versus, where's my voice in this, or what's my opinion with my work. And it kind of hit me like at this realization where I was like, if I don't stop doing this and create something that's undeniably myself or unapologetically me, I'm just going to keep turning out work that isn't me and looks like someone else or created for something else. So I put a hard stop and ultimately invested in myself, started creating an entirely new body of work. And the way that I like to describe it to people is I stopped taking pictures and started creating them. I started using storytelling and narrative and concept to create something that I felt like could be interpreted a million different ways and looked at for longer than a brief moment, and created something that was mine. And that kind of changed my whole perspective on photography in general. That was like, you really can create something that is identifiable just by looking at it, saying like, oh, I know exactly who created that piece. I know because that's their opinion and that's their voice coming straight through. I can recognize Omar's work. I can recognize Bruce Gilden's work. All of these people that exist on these platforms and everything that we see every day. The ones that you come back to are the ones that have the clearest voice and can be instantly recognized. And I think that that's, part of this whole journey in general.
Yeah, yeah, it's exciting journey, from the standpoint of you're trying to figure things out, and especially today, right? Because back in the day, like we were talking about before, back in the day, you if you were an accomplished photographer, you spent a lot of time in a dark room, and this is ancient history, but it took a lot of time to make a print and a lot of money, a lot of expense to do it, and then you'd have a really tiny, limited audience at the end of the day. But you fast forward to today, or back in the old days, finding out what your particular look and your genre was very expensive and very time consuming, and some people have probably never even found it, right? Well, whereas today, hey, this week I'm going to experiment in fashion. Next week is landscape. Maybe I'll try a little macro. Maybe I'll do this, and you get instant feedback
Totally.
both from a tutelage, just learning how to do the thing, but also from a giant crowd of people that can give you feedback where you couldn't get that before. So I wonder, like today, how do these newer photographers with this world of NFTs backing everything up and adding this value? How do you figure out what your thing is without being tainted? I don't know. Maybe it's not an answerable question. Without being tainted by the likes, right? Without being tainted, or if that's the thing that you're doing, yeah, I'm just creating art because I want to sell it, right? This is what I do. I'm a machine. Or if you're an artist that wants to create because there's a thing gnawing at the base of your skull and it won't stop until you create this thing that's in your head, regardless of who buys it. But which one, I'm wondering what's the right play, like, or is it both? I don't know. Dal,
No, I think it's a
you
little
have the
bit of
mic.
both.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna say, I think it's a little bit of both as well, right? Because it's like one of those things where if you tell a joke in a forest and no one hears it, then, is it funny, right? We need the audience at the end of the day. We want the audience, right? Because we want to share, generally, right? Not necessarily. I think we create, of course, as I was saying, we create first and foremost for ourselves because we're trying to, answer our own questions or yeah, do our own research. And obviously the person that always comes to mind when I when this subject comes around is Vivian Meyer. I mean, what do we know? For all we know, she had like someone that she showed her photographs, or shared them, or maybe she didn't, and she, did this whole process of her life creating without showing it to anyone, and now we know about her, right? So it can be a little bit of both, but it is true that the social media echo chamber, in that sense, for artists can be a little bit of a double sword, a double-edged sword. It can help you hone and get better in a certain way and get more excited, but it also has this side of clout chasing, where I see a lot of people as well that probably would have never picked up a camera or anything artistic for that matter in their lives, but now because there is this instant gratification machine, then they're going out and doing, basically emulating anything and everything they see that gives, is going to give them clout, and I think that's where the you separate the artist from the craftsman in a certain way, as Johnny was saying, when you can really identify someone else's work and see, okay, this is this person's, because that person has a voice and is very authentic, and it's not someone that is completely trying to emulate work of someone else just because of clout.
Yeah, but is it yeah, the emulation is that fake it till you make it, right? Do you emulate? Do I go out? I'm inspired by Omar's work. So do I go
Are we
out
gonna
and
are we gonna Theranos here now?
yeah, there we go. Hey, that was blatant, right? So, but seriously, do we if I wanna be like Omar, do I go out and create my own brand of performative NFTs, right? With a slight twist on it,
But
embrace and
but
extend,
why would you want to
right?
be why would you want to be like me? Like, I studied with Marcel, one of the biggest artists in the world, and one of the things he always told us, he didn't want us to be like him. He wanted us
Yeah.
to be us. So you can get inspired, but again, that's I think one of the phrases that is also attributed to Picasso is, good artists copy, great artists steal, and stealing, it's
Hmm.
making it your own, it's finding your own voice, and trying to create your own universe.
I wonder, how do you know that though? Like how do you know who you are, especially as an artist? Many of us don't know who we are as humans, right? How do you find out who you are as an artist? Is the process, well, like we talk about on that
I
podcast,
th-
is the process
I
just
think
try
people
different
find it for
things?
you. I
Yeah,
think people find that for you. I think, eventually, you're gonna start creating and finding the things that pertain to you, like that 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 are true to you. I'll give you a couple of examples, but um let's put my own example, right? I started photographing dance because that was part of my language. I studied mime. I wasn't photographing dance originally. I was photographing many different things, but my mind always came back to that in a certain way. And even when I was photographing street, I was looking for intentions, and I was looking for, like people's faces, and emotions that are very visual. So I always went back to the mime. So that's something that is very me, and that's, I think you can see it through my work, that it's oftentimes very narrative in that sense. I know the photographers that, to give you an example of another photographer, a friend of mine, I'm not going to name his name, but he photographs a lot of homeless people and people in need. But I've always seen his work that he does it in such a different way that it didn't never felt exploitative. It felt very tactful. And then when I got to know him better, he told me that his dad used to live in the streets often. Like, he used to find his dad in the streets oftentimes because his dad was an alcoholic. So if you think of it, he was oftentimes finding his dad in other people that he saw, and that was his
yeah,
truth, right? So, but at the end of the day, I think also people will, when people can look at your work and say, this is, this person's work, then you know that, you have found your voice in a certain way.
yeah. Finding your voice, Erica. You have your hand up.
I love that question. How do you know it's when it's your own voice? My
Hmm.
2 cents is that my compass is my joy, because it's like and I guess the way I can sort of describe that from my journey was like I worked as a painter and a creative director, designer, and filmmaker before I finally like became a photographer. And now I'm just realizing during this call that, like, possibly not so coincidentally, photography was the only art I never took a single class in. So yeah, this is really embarrassing to admit almost, but it's almost because, and sorry, mom and dad, but like I came from kind of a very like a very kind of controlling household. But like what I realized is that, like, I guess for whatever reason, and maybe it's that I'm weak in some weird way, but like, I almost needed it to be completely mine. And I needed to just do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, not for money at all. And in fact, it was almost like sheer luck that I then, because with the timing of it all, everybody's like, you have to get on Instagram. And I'm like, I can't do it. I guess I didn't exactly know, but I feel like I was probably a little afraid that I would get caught up in the like chasing and the clout chasing. And I also kind of was banking on Twitter being the ultimate, platform or whatever that we'd all flock to. But I honestly, I think, when I really realized that it was my thing and this was actually my true expression was finally just when I had that same amount of freedom and joy that I had like in high school before I was trained in any of it. Like I was chasing
Interesting.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder, and there's some validity to that, and Johnny, I want you to take the mic next, but part of what I wonder with all of this kind of conversation about value and all that is that there's the line, there's a line in there, right, about that divides. I can do this as a hobbyist. I'm an advanced amateur, and during the day I'm a lawyer, but at night I pick up the camera and I go out and do street photography, and I don't care if I make a dime from it because I'm following my heart, and that's what I love to do. The other side of it is I'm trying to buy formula for my kid, right? Or I gotta make rent, and I want to make this photography thing work. And when I create shots that look like this, people like it, and collectors seem to like this thing, even though I don't like it that much. But my kid is crying. I got to feed my kid. On the other side of it, I'm an artist. How dare you ask me to create something that's not in my heart? I don't know. Johnny, maybe you could tackle that, with with all of it. I don't know.
I think I might need it set up as a question. I'm not sure how to go into that one from here.
Oh yeah, I'll set it up as a question. So what? Here's the AB
Okay.
question. Like, you're a photographer. You're an artist first and foremost, and you have to serve two masters. One master is your heart and your art. The other master is your bank account, right? And
Yeah.
you want to grow. You want to get well known. You want to be known for something. You want a big Twitter following and all that stuff, but you still got to eat. You still got to pay rent, put gas in the car, and all that stuff. How do you reconcile those two things? Do you do both? Do you just say, I'm just going to be hungry for 10 years and follow my heart, and maybe it'll lead to the pot of gold? Or do you go the other direction and just create things that the world wants and is willing to pay for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously something like this, I think, is deeply personal to the
Mm-hmm.
specific journey that someone is on. I think, you know, at least in my situation, the transition going into photography sort of stemmed initially from being an editor. I was in post production for a number of years and hadn't
Nice.
really even picked up the camera. And so, there was a journey of getting there. But I think that, like, if you are going from having never touched a camera to I want to pick this thing up and see if I can make a career out of it, there's going to be a long curve, and I don't know, maybe you'll get lucky and jump right into it. But um, the thing that I would consider is, like, you can certainly do both. You can have a day job and pick up a camera and start learning and um, you know, play your cards and figure out what's going to work for you and create a body of work and see what happens. And I think that that's kind of like a low risk entry where you still keep your day job and you figure it out as you go. And it maybe takes you, a significant longer runway to get there, but at least you didn't risk your livelihood on it. The inverse version of that is you go all in and you buy all the stuff and you say, this is going to be my career, and I'm going to make it or break it. And there's probably, an exponential curve that happens where you invest time and effort in creating a body of work that's uniquely yours. And there's a discovery over a number of years that, this is my voice. And, this is what I want to put out in the world and see what happens. And obviously, there's a whole commercial industry in advertising, which is sort of the world that I play in mostly. So this is a full-time thing for me. There's no alternative version, and I don't even really think that I might be good at anything else besides taking photos. So it's kind of an all-in for me. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's obviously a number of entry points, but I think that you can certainly do both, and you don't have to take the riskier version. There was a point where I had to take the risky version and say, I got to stop creating work for other people and create my own, and basically quit all of that, and went on my own sort of path and wound up here.
Yeah. Frederick, can I add a couple of things to this? So my thoughts is that I think a lot of the questions you're asking apply to everyone, not just photographers, not just artists, right? Like we all have things that we like to do and value that don't pay, right? Or don't, or we're not doing them for any other reason, right? And I think, going back to the topic of the conversation is around value, right? And I think Omar made the distinction between kind of price and appreciation, right? Or value, as we think of it, as like financial value versus value for its own kind of sake, right? And I think that things that have value tend to be things that are worth doing in their own sake, right? So I think, if you enjoy dancing, right, it doesn't matter if you dance badly, right? Like there's value for you in dancing, right? Or in singing badly, right? Things that are worth doing, they're worth doing badly usually, right? And it means that other people may not appreciate your dancing, but there's value in your dancing, right? And I think that's kind of what we're kind of getting to a little bit here is like, well, there's value to you and you do it. And then, there are things that have value also for, in addition to having value for their own sake, they also have value for other people, right? And I think if you're lucky, you can make sure those two things kind of work, right? Being this an NFT conversation, NFT spaces, I think one of the nice things about NFTs is that hopefully they are helping reduce that conflict a little bit, right? For people, for artists particularly, right? They're hopefully creating a way for artists to do what they love and as well create value for others, right? And I think that is the power of kind of this whole space.
Hey, Dap, continue that just a little bit because we talked one of the previous spaces we were talking about curation and just sort of the ideas around curation and the challenges that people that are curating face and all the things, I'm curious in the light of this conversation, we're talking about process and how to create value and who to create and who are you creating for. If your ultimate goal is to create something or a collection or a single piece that you're going to present to an organization, which Dap, you're the perfect person to answer this question. You're going to create something that's going to present it to an organization. Under that light, how should you proceed? And I'll put a finer point on it. Should you proceed by, hey, I'm just creating stuff that speaks to me, and then I'm going to let them curate it. If they like it, they like it. If not, then they can pound sand, right? Or do you look at, okay, they're curating this. Let me look at some of the other things that they've curated because I really want to get in with them. I'm going to create things that fit the type of work that I feel like they want because I really want to be involved with that particular organization. How would you advise somebody that's on that fence to proceed? Follow their heart or follow what they think the curator's heart is?
I think more the former, so more follow your heart. But what I mean, but what I mean by that is like you're the first curator of your own work, right? I think people kind of so even subconsciously understand that, right? You're currently thinking about what is it that you want to put out in terms of work. Even when you have your ideas, that's the beginning of curation, right? Like, even before you create anything, and then how you tell your own story. It is all part of that. So as a curator, we do look at what the artist is already telling us, right? And I think curation is also storytelling, as I said this earlier, right? And so, but we don't have to tell the story from scratch, right? We tell the stories in a way that, using the raw material that is there from the artist, right? So I think if you're creating for yourself and you're creating your own work, you've already kind of taken a big part of that step, and there will be different curators or organizations or groups or collectives or whatever you want to call it that will be in line or will vibe with whatever it is that you have done. So I think it's finding your pocket there rather than trying to mold yourself to fit something.
Yeah. I think that's I was going to say that's the right answer, but that's the answer that I think is correct. Erica, you have your hand up. You want to throw something in there?
Yeah, I'll just be real quick here. I love that question, Frederick, about who are you creating for? Yeah, I love the question about who are you creating for, because it seems like duh, it seems really obvious, but it's a great question, because if you're generous, right, you also want to be creating for other people. So anyway, I guess I'm realizing it's kind of everyone, including me, and so I guess what I'm fighting for more than anything is for the work or the body of work to rise to a level that will be the best for sort of everyone, including me. But and I also have learned through this talk, like, people talk about in the space, they talk about protecting your peace, and usually people are talking about like eating, drinking, and taking naps. But I'm realizing that sort of over a longer span, two things that I didn't realize I was protecting, but I was viciously protecting, was like my relationship to photography and filmmaking. So what I ended up doing was making a real decision, or a strong kind of decision early on in my career, where I said, like, interesting, I didn't even know what graphic design was, but I found it and I thought that's really cool, because that could kind of be my backup, like, because it's sort of more, I don't know, I don't want to say easier, but it's more of a craft that requires a lot of left brain and a lot of, kind of client input and stuff like that. And so that's the way that I ended up putting the bread on the table. But then all that time I was protecting kind of my relationship to remaining as pure as possible with the mediums of photography and film. So it just ended up working out well, because I don't know, because I'm a people pleaser, I guess, to some degree. It's it's definitely, I can get caught up in someone else's perspective on something and kind of lose that. So I just didn't want to lose that with either medium, I guess.
I wonder, Erica, do you, since you have a graphic design background, do you find little nuggets of the graphic design work that you used to do, or maybe still do, finding its way into your photography work? Any of those sensibilities kind of show up in there?
I think it's like all one big craft, there's like different equipment, but same. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm excited to explore that a lot more and kind of see how they act. I was just saying that to my husband today, how design and photography become this whole new world. But yeah, mostly I would say compositionally, and in terms of real strong shapes and minimalism and things like that.
Interesting. All right, we're coming to the end of another light hour. Just want to remind everyone that we're doing these things twice a week. We're doing one like this one on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. U.S. Pacific time, and a second one on Thursdays at 10 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. So definitely hang out. I'm trying to keep these kind of, lighthearted but informational at the same time. But definitely join us and come on stage and chat. I want to give the last word to Dap. Dap, I know there's some stuff happening over, in the world of light. Maybe you can close us out with a little update of what's happening over there.
I guess I could talk a little bit about the fact that we finished our curation now, so we have all of the art, and we are in the process of kind of onboarding all the photographers, and it's exciting. I mean, I'm very, very excited what we came up with, like in terms of the art that we were able to receive and curate, and stay tuned, because sneak peeks are already coming in, but we're gonna have I think when you guys see the full collection, you're going to be really, really amazed by it. So,
love it, love it. Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us for this one. You guys have any ideas for different topics that you'd like us to cover? Feel free to tweet at me or Light, and we'll incorporate them into an upcoming show. Also, I'm producing a podcast for Light, so if you guys have suggestions for guests or topics that you'd like me to cover in a podcasting type interview or even roundtable format, just let me know. Just shoot me a tweet, and I'll put it on the list. All right, folks, we'll leave it right there. Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you all again, maybe this Thursday.
All right.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
All right, and thanks, Omar. Thank you. You guys are fantastic.